At 6:02 a.m., my door shook like somebody was trying to repossess my life with a clipboard. The tow truck hook kissed the axle of my work truck, and our pipes coughed before dying as a fresh brass padlock winked from the community well box. Cheryl Maddox, our HOA president in a navy blazer and pearls, smiled like this was a bake sale and said, "Immediate fines. $500 for the mailbox, $250 a day until corrected, plus $100 per email. If you try to argue while my kid sister Emma stood barefoot behind me, whispering." They turned off the water. And I told Cheryl my garage outlet was on my meter, not stealing from anyone, and she tilted her chin and said, "Read the CCNRs like everyone else." Then waved at the tow driver, proceed, and yeah, that happened. My name is Luke Bennett. I'm a civil engineer who collects receipts the way other people collect magnets. We moved into Maple Ridge Estates in Clearview County so I could be close to Mom and keep Emma steady. I poured a simple gravel side pad, built a cedar fence, and put up a plain gray mailbox because the store was out of sandstone tan. And apparently, that made me public enemy number one. You know what I mean. I tried being reasonable first. I emailed the board, asking for exact sections of the rules, attached the Amazon receipt for the mailbox color code. The survey that showed the pad was on my parcel. A video of the extension cord plugging into my own GFC 20 minutes later, I got an email from president@mapleridgehoa.org. Mail to president@mapleridgehoa.org that said further correspondence would be charged $50 per email. I laughed out loud in an empty kitchen with a dead faucet. And that metallic taste you get when somebody presses on your sense of fairness and then misses. Alvarez next door slipped over in a blue robe and said in a hush, "She did this to the Taylors last year." Then a developer scooped their corner lot cheap, and a name floated in the morning heat like a fly. You can't swat. Pierce and Weller Homes. So I drove to the county recorder, met a clerk named Dana, who had librarian patience and a little grin for nonsense. We pulled the recorded CCNRs and bylaws and something called an emergency enforcement amendment that supposedly let Cheryl tow fine and cut amenities without hearings on paper. It said adopted 2 months back on the computer. The PDF told the truth, created 9 days after that adoption date. Modified 2 hours before a mail merge, labeled lien letters. The notary commission printed on the bottom had expired last year. Dana tipped the screen toward me and said, "People forget PDFs tattle," and I wrote the notary name down and just stared at that crisp digital stamp that didn't smudge like ink ever does. We pulled the old plat too. The well. The retention basin. The easement that crosses the side of my lot to carry stormwater out a red arrow on the original plan marked an overflow swale behind my fence. That swale was now buried under President's Pavilion. A gazebo with string lights and a little plaque that said, "Donated by Pierce and Weller," which meant our neighborhood pressure valve was corked so someone could host wine night. You don't have to be an engineer to know how that story ends when the sky opens. A guy in his 30s was waiting by my curb when I got home, hands in pockets scanning grades like a hawk. "Brian Cho," he said. Retired Army Corps, he'd taken pre-project photos because the pavilion bugged him. He walked me through simple math and ugly outcomes. 5-inch rain, blocked swale water stacks up and looks for the low path, which is my fence line, my sister's bedroom wall, our living room rug. That afternoon, Mrs. Alvarez slid me a manila folder like a spy. Inside were board emails she'd printed back when transparency still sounded cute. One thread had Cheryl begging for temporary emergency powers. To fine without hearings, the board voted no, 3-2. A month later, a beautification donation from Pierce and Weller appeared. 3 weeks after that, the first wave of identical emergency fines hit vendor invoices. Showed pavilion erosion control paid from something called Emergency Compliance Fund, and the HOA's lawyer Trent Carlisle billed policy review while sending me a letter that said, my records requests were harassment. I typed back that open records are not harassment. Under County Statute 45-3109, then deleted the word clown and hit send. The certified letter that arrived the next morning was a brick wrapped in legalese. Notice of lion and intent to foreclose. Total 8,400 a summary. Foreclosure vote set for 72 hours from now. The HOA's Facebook page called me a danger to property values under a photo of my extension cord. And someone typed, water is a privilege, with their actual name next to it. I laughed until it sounded like choking. Then I stopped laughing and got to work. I printed everything and color-coded like a TV detective. Blue for recorded docs, red for emails, green for the money, yellow for photos drove to court, filed for a temporary restraining order. To stop the water shut off the towing and the lien, until a judge could decide if this amendment was real or just. Theater alleged wrongful utility. Interference, due process violations. Easement, abuse, fraud in corporate filings, and self-dealing. Because we were paying for a gazebo from an emergency fund while threatening to foreclose over a mailbox. And when the clerk stamped the TRO, it felt like somebody finally put a ref on the field. I took it to the well, where Deputy Lila Martinez met me. With calm eyes, she read the order. Said, it's active if knotted at the padlock, and when the bolt cutters snapped and the pipes hissed and the faucet sputtered to life, Emma cheered like we'd hit a buzzer beater, and I just stood there with wet hands and that ridiculous grin people wear when hope sneaks back in. That night, I rewatched a Zoom board meeting Ruth had saved, cranked the audio, and there it was. At a 42:13, Cheryl leaning off camera saying, we can finalize later. Trent will clean the signatures. I froze the frame. The amendment with the expired notary stamp sat in her lap. The file properties on the shared screen said, Creator Trent Carlisle, and the modified time matched the lien mail merge. I felt the anger go quiet in my chest. Not gone, just smooth. Like, okay, you left fingerprints. Thank you. The special meeting at the clubhouse smelled like old coffee and new panic phones everywhere. Nolan Pierce in the back with a realtor tan and that easy grin men wear when they think they're bulletproof. Cheryl at the dais, treasurer, refusing to look up. Secretary, smoothing paper that didn't need smoothing. Gavel hang first item. Foreclosure proceedings for Mr. Bennett. I stood and said, point of order, and the room tilted toward me like a radio dial. Finding a station, I handed out packet copies. Like communion notary. Commission expired last year. PDF metadata. Created 9 days late. Modified 2 hours. Pre-liens easement. Showing my side pad is mine. Stormwater plan with the red arrow. Checks from the Emergency Compliance Fund to Pierce and Weller for pavilion work. While my water was shut off, I didn't raise my voice, paper. Can speak just fine, Cheryl said. Baseless counsel approved, and I tapped the laptop projector. Beeped her voice filled her own meeting. We can finalize later. Trent will clean the signatures. A few gasps, a loud church word from the back. Carlisle popped up too fast and hit his knee. Out of context formatting. And I said, "Is that what we're calling backdating with an expired notary now then?" Ruth rose with her cane and waved last year's board vote. They voted no on emergency powers. 3-2. She lied about the tally, and she knew it, and Brian stepped forward with the flood map and the plain truth block. The swale and the first big rain is coming to your carpet, and people who didn't care about my mailbox suddenly cared a lot about their living rooms. Deputy Martinez lifted the TRO and said the HOA was barred from cutting utilities or enforcing liens until the court said otherwise. Any board member who kept going could face contempt. I handed up a certification from the recorder that the amendment was never properly recorded. You can't cash a check. You drew on a napkin. A guy in a golf shirt stood up and shouted, "Motion to recall the board." 3 quick seconds, and the room was chanting, "Second." Cheryl hammered the gavel and said, "This meeting is out of order." She looked at the lawyer, the developer, the door, like maybe one of them was going to save her. The treasurer went white, and then a court runner stepped in, with a folder like a hot pan. Martinez read, nodded to herself, and turned to the dais. By order of the court, effective this evening, governance of Maple Ridge is placed under an independent receiver, pending investigation surrender. Keys, access cards, financial records, and electronic credentials immediately. Paper turned into consequence in one breath. Cheryl's jaw worked like gravel. Then she unclipped her president badge and set it on the table with a little click that sounded louder than the gavel. She leaned toward me and said, "Soft, you think you won? You turned neighbors into enemies." I kept my voice low. "You did that when you padlocked a family's water to win a fee." The treasurer slid his card. The secretary handed over a login sheet. Nolan started for the door like a man crossing a snake field. The room clapped in that messy human way, a mix of relief and anger and a little fear. And Emma's hand found mine and stopped shaking. "I'm not going to give you a slow-motion victory lap. The receiver still has to unwind the mess. The pavilion still sits on a swale, like a cork in a bottle. The developer still has attorneys who know the Friday. At 4:59, trick people who cheered tonight might grumble when dues bump. $10 to fix what was broken. That's real life. But I will remember the sound of that badge hitting wood. The moment fear left the room, not because I was loud, but because the bylaws, the plat, the little red arrow, outlasted the bluff. Cheryl didn't lose to me. She lost to the rules she weaponized, and yeah, that felt right. I'll stop it here. At the badge, the gavel, the room remembering what fair looks like, and hand it to you should any HOA be able to kill a family's water over a paint shade, is a developer donation. Still generosity. When it blocks a flood path and gets paid from something called emergency compliance, have you watched the word compliance turn into a baseball bat in your neighborhood? You can say I was stubborn, or say I was right. But tell me why. Drop your take in the comments. Tell me your one receipt that changed everything. And if there's a little red arrow no one's looked at in your town, maybe tonight's the night you go find it.